Well, it is that time again. And for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about because you weren't here 8 years ago, don't worry, because I'm going to enlighten you. 8 years ago, I played Tekken 7. I despised it. It's actually one of my highest viewed videos, but I basically shat on that game. I hated it so much. I played it for a couple of hours after buying it and then just had to make a reaction video saying how much I hated the hell out of its lack of single player content, how it looked crap, how the game felt like it cheaped out in so many ways. And I was like, I remember a time where Bandai Namco, or at least Namco, made products that were worth a shit. And then you got Tekken 7, and that was 5 years after Soul Calibur V, and it was just inexcusable. Now Tekken 8 drops, and I just really want to thank my girlfriend because she bought me a copy of this. I almost couldn't get it because I'm between jobs, and I was actually starting to think, I don't know if I could get it. And she was like, "Well, I've earned my paycheck this month. You can get it for an anniversary present." And I was like, "Oh hell to the yes!" So I finally got to installing it and got it booted up, and I played through the campaign and a little bit of all the modes that I've been able to access. So I don't want this to be shitting on Tekken 7 too, but I do kind of want to go over my problems with 7 just to establish what I felt needed improving. So the first one was the campaign. I felt like it was a lot of filler that led to a fight that was advertised on the box. But to get there, you had to watch hours and hours of just stuff. Admittedly, it didn't really impress me. Now, I know some people really like the campaign of 7. I personally just didn't get anything out of it. Except for the very end and the very beginning, not much really appealed to me. I also really didn't like the constant use of still images with narration over them, and this constant need as well to use old footage. I get what they were trying to do, but it just doesn't work when you're using shit from PS2 and trying to pass it off as it happening in tangent with stuff that's happening in a PS4 game. It just doesn't work. I'm sorry. I get that it's meant to be some form of homage to previous chapters of the game's story. I just wasn't buying it. After you finish the campaign, the only bit of substantial single player content left is the treasure battle mode, which is basically the arcade ghost mode from Dark Resurrection 6 and 5, but it's nowhere near as good. And you get these random prizes, but you don't really want any of them, and you're just playing it because it's the only single player mode where you can continuously play. If you want to say, well, there was the online was abysmal because it was basically just 2006 standards for an online game. Just quick mode, ranked mode, and create a lobby, and that was about it. There was a couple of shitty modes, and honestly, for 2006, like I said, yeah, it would have been fine. But this was 2017. Its competitors were doing bigger and better things, more interesting things with the online concept. Namco Bandai themselves, with Soul Calibur V, had a lobby mode which you could hang around and play with other people and chat before you had a fight and after the fight. And they removed all that and just replaced it with the most basic bitch stuff for Tekken 7, and I despised it. Finally, there was the individual character endings. Instead of there being a series of fights which told a story, like in Tekken 5 or Tekken 6 even, which wasn't quite as good as 5, because 5 had mini cutscenes in between the things to establish the fight and the characters, whereas 6 was just a series of fights and then an end cutscene. But it was still better than 7, which was one fight, one end cutscene, and the endings weren't very good in 7. I remember 2 or 3 of them, and the rest have just faded to the back of my mind. In time, I just can't remember any of them. I can remember so many of the ones from previous games, but 7's just go completely over my head. The thing is, though, the worst thing about those endings was the Yoshimitsu and Leo ones, because they were really, really uncomfortable. I really didn't like them. Basically, Yoshimitsu, for comedy, in quotations, became some weird trans fetishizing pedo. And for some reason, someone thought that was really funny and decided to make it his entire character in Tekken 7. Leo really needed an adult in those parts, and I hated that that's how they treated Leo in Tekken 7. But anyway, enough about 7 before I have an aneurysm. Bottom line was, we waited like 8 years between Tekken 6 and 7. I know that Tag 2 came out in between those, but I don't care. I know people tried to point that out to me. I really don't care. Main series in like entries in the franchise, Tekken 7, we waited like 8 years for it. It was garbage. We waited another 7 years for this one, and it's really good. Every problem I had with 7 has been laid to rest. The campaign is really enjoyable to me. It's just a lot of silliness. It's like over the top Dragon Ball stuff mixed with a bit of like Kingdom Hearts and Persona-y kind of cheesiness, which I kind of dig because honestly, it's something. There's something to grab onto with this. It's exploring things which were kind of left up in the air in the previous games, which again I appreciate. There's a lot of use for all the characters. It's not just 2 or 3 of the characters who feature and then the rest just sort of exist. They all sort of have a crack at being characters in this campaign, and I do kind of appreciate that. I get that some are always going to be used more than others, but in this game especially, I feel like they really tried their best to make everyone of some form of use over the course of the story, and I love it. Another problem that they fixed is the long-lasting problem of Jin, Heihachi, and Kazuya, because they are described as stars in this game, and I feel like 3 stars orbiting each other makes a bit of a mess, because only 2 of them can fight at the same time, and the third one is, well, a third wheel. And as a result, in Tekken 6, Kazuya was more or less an afterthought, and then in Tekken 7, Jin was basically an afterthought. Now you've got rid of Heihachi, you can actually have time to develop the 2 main characters. They actually decided to have Jin go through a redemption arc, so he finally serves a different role to Kazuya, which I kind of appreciate. And I also appreciate that him and Kazuya are actually on screen for the first time ever, as far as I can remember. They might have been in like one of the earlier games, but I can't remember them prominently featuring on screen as much as they have in this game. It almost felt like I always was like, what is their relationship? Because I can't remember ever seeing Jin and Kazuya even speak to one another. Never mind actually express their reasons for having conflict. I never understood why Kazuya and Jin didn't like each other up until, like, some of the later games past Tekken 5. And now it's like, oh, good, there's actual reasons for the conflict. That's really cool. I've played a few of the character endings. I actually really liked the ones I played. A lot of them were a lot of fun. One of them really made me laugh. Martial Laws made me laugh a lot. I found it very funny. And a lot of them are kind of interesting or amusing on some level. None of them feel completely half-assed like Tekken 7's did, which I admittedly felt were just so forgettable that I'd forgotten them by the time I got back to the menu. I feel like this game looks really good. I didn't ever like the way Tekken 7 looked. Even on PC with max settings, I felt it looked a bit crap. Tekken 8 looks really good in comparison. I adore the way this game looks. I like as well how everything's been designed a lot better in this game than it was in Tekken 7. A lot of the costumes in 7 look kind of awkward. I get that some people are going to be like, oh, what about the fight mechanics? Fight mechanics have changed a little bit with all the characters. The moves have changed a little bit. I'm not like the most deep diving expert into that sort of stuff, but I have to admit, I did find it kind of refreshing that they decided to change a lot of the animations and the character like combos and certain other attacks that have been there for years have now been replaced with something else, and most of them that I've seen work. I actually quite like a lot of them. I don't have many complaints on that front. If anything, I only have positives to say about it because I feel like it doesn't feel like the same game as Tekken 5, like Tekken 7 did. Which, in all honesty, Tekken 7 should not feel like Tekken 5 when it's 2 generations down the line. There's also a Tekken Ball game, which is like volleyball, but you like use fighting control mechanics to blast the ball at each other and do damage. I kind of like it as a idea, and it's not just Tekken Bowl again, which admittedly I feel like has gotten stale by now because it's been a thing since like 2000. And I'm like, yeah, I hate to say it, but I played so much of this, I don't exactly enjoy it anymore. It was in 7, and I feel like they tried with that more than any other aspects of the game, but it still felt like the same shit as it did on the PSP, like all those years ago. So yeah, I just sort of figured I'd conclude because this is already longer than the I'm gonna shut on Tekken 7 video I did 6, 7 years ago now. But I actually really had a lot of fun with this one compared to, well, 7 and Soul Calibur 5. Soul Calibur 6, I feel like that game really restored some faith back in Namco, but it wasn't enough. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a fluke. And now I can see it's not a fluke. There's a clear pattern that they are improving. They are taking on board what people said in the 2010s, and they're making their games better as a result. I'm hoping at this point that there won't be another decade of just absolute trash followed by cope, because honestly, I don't think I can do another decade of it. I don't think I can. You've got to keep being good now, Namco. You can't stop being good because you've made a bit of money actually making good games. Um, Overall, yeah, definitely enjoyed this one. I'd recommend giving the series another chance if 7 didn't really do it for you, because I feel like this game has improved everything from 7. And the worst case scenario is it will have a different set of problems, but it won't be anywhere near as bad, I promise.
Professor Curious is okay.